So, welcome everyone to today's webinar series on affirmations for self-healing. So, today we have Brahmachari Jemal with us, and today we are going to share on the topic of humility. So, first, I'm going to just read the reading, then do the affirmation, and then Brahmachari Jemal will start the session. So, humility. Humility is not self-depreciation, it is self-forgetfulness. It is knowing that God alone is the doer. It is the realization that nothing in the shadow world of appearances is all that important except as it draws us closer to the God. Never tell yourself that you are sinful or weak or incompetent or lazy, except as such, a statement may help you to surrender joyfully to God's power. Then live by that power. Never wear the mask of false humility. Humility is self-acceptance and self-honesty. You have a right to all the power if you seek it in infinity. And if you never hold the thought that it resides in your little self, so let's affirm. We'll affirm loudly once, then in a medium voice, and then in a whisper, and then offering up mentally. So let's affirm first loudly. Please repeat with me. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. Now mentally, I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. O Lord, thou art the doer, Lord, not I. Express thy perfection through me as I strive ever eagerly to live in thy life.
So we have a very wonderful topic here of humility. But before I get into the topic, one person there asked a question in the chat. And I don't know that I would take any others this evening, but I wanted to answer that one because I think it's very important in the moment in history that we're living in. And the question is, how can I stop negative thoughts from coming into my mind? And perhaps many of us are experiencing this right now. Perhaps many of us are watching more news than we normally would, just wanting to know what's going on in the world and in our neighborhood. And perhaps there's a lot of negativity in it. Well, maybe that's one answer, is limit the amount that we are on our mobile phones. But on a deeper level, that's up to you how much you need to do with that. On a deeper level, I'm talking on a spiritual level now. The real way out of this conundrum is to learn to control the energy within our own being and learn to feel and control the energy in our spines. And if we can do that, we then can learn to control our level of consciousness. And when we, using the medium of energy, can raise our consciousness to higher levels in the spine, then the lower thoughts can't affect us. You see, we are nothing more than radio transmitters and receivers, but we can consciously learn how to tune out undesirable thoughts. That is in the book, Autobiography of a Yogi. I'm not sure. It might be in the chapter called The Cauliflower Robbery. I'm not sure. But where it is in the Autobiography of a Yogi doesn't matter. The fact is, it's truth that we can learn to tune out undesirable thoughts when we learn to live in higher levels of consciousness. So everything that we're doing on the spiritual path, all of the different meditation techniques, chanting, prayer, serving others, And now let's get to the topic. Everything that we can do to minimize ego will help us learn to be able to control our thoughts. But the purpose of life is to be able to release the ego, to give up the ego back into God's hands, to merge into oneness with God, which means to merge into perfect joy. And there's no better deal than that. Once we're in perfect joy, again, absolutely nothing can touch us. But we realize, and self-realization, it's a process of realization. It's very easy to just say, all is Brahma. That, oh yes, he's doing it through me, he's doing it through you, it's all God. Yeah, but then when the test comes and the stress comes, can we still hold on to that inner joy? And that's really the test for us to know. And if we're watching our ego go wild and our joy levels go down and our emotions run around and our minds having negative thoughts, it's safe to say that we have not yet achieved self-realization. There's a few points that I wanted to make in this reading, and one of them is that this reading really focuses on God's power. And it's fascinating because you would think humility would be, oh, no, no, I don't want any power. No, please, just leave me alone. I won't talk to you. You won't talk to me. Oh, meek and mild. But here it's saying you have the entire power of all of the universe. But the whole thing is for us not to think that it's ours. When we think that it's ours, that power goes away from us. When we think that it's God's power and we're constantly in tune with God and asking God, what does he want to do through us, then we have all of the power. A very interesting thing Paramahansa Yogananda said to Rajarsi Janakananda, never forget where your power comes from. And this was the guru to the disciple. And the disciple said, just like a little boy, in the tone of voice of a little boy, I know, sir, it comes from you. And ultimately, all of the power is coming from the guru and is coming from God. And the more we can surrender to that power, the more we can utilize it, and utilize it to do good, and utilize it to be happy, and to free ourselves from negative thoughts, to free ourselves from all of the darkness in this entire world. But we have to go towards the light. We have to live in light. We have to become channels for light. That Paramahansa Yogananda said, the channel is blessed by that which flows through it. And so if we don't want to have negative thoughts, I guess I'm dwelling on this topic a lot, but I think it's important for everyone right now. If we don't want to have negative thoughts, then we need to, of course, learn how to have positive thoughts, but become a channel for positivity and realize the power that's going on in this world, that it's a subtle power. And the power of our thoughts is very important, and it is important for us to learn to control those. And it is important for us to learn how to control our heart's feelings. And again, as I said in the beginning, this comes through learning to control the energy in the spine. Someone once said to Paramahansa Yogananda, oh, you're so humble. And his reply was, how can there be humility when there is no consciousness of ego? And this is the highest kind of humility, is not to have any ego at all. Humility is not taking dirt and throwing it on our own head and saying, oh, I'm so humble, I don't care if I'm dirty and I'm worthless and I'm meaningless, I'll throw dirt on my head. We end up concentrating on our head and on the dirt if we do that. But true humility is realizing that we're not really, you're not who you think you are. We're not this little body, we're not these thoughts. And so looking at humility, we can get into ego and we can think, I'm so great, I can do this, I can do that. But obviously it's doomed to fall, and then and these feelings will come, these thoughts will come, I'm a loser, God help me now, because I can't do anything, and I always make mistakes, and I'm no good. And this just alternates back and forth. But all that is just the ego moving back and forth, of the ego saying, I'm less than, I'm more than, I'm less than, I'm more than. and we want to learn how to get off of that roller coaster. I also, and then I'll turn it over to Premdas, but I need to point out that getting rid of ego, it's no little job. It's a big job. And before we can really get rid of ego and completely cast it out, that we have to learn how to get rid of this roller coaster of I'm really happy, I'm really sad, I'm really happy, I'm really sad, and all of these reactions that are going on into everything that's happening, or reactions in response to everything that's happening in the outside world. If we first can learn to control that, first learn how to control the heart's feelings, learn how to control the energy, then with that controlled heart, with that controlled energy, with that controlled mind, we can cast ego back into God's hands and back into God's feet, or at his feet. My pronouns today seem to be everywhere. Only God would know why that could be. So to end up here, to recap, that first, have a healthy ego. Have something that feels that I can get this done. Then slowly learn how to feel God can get this done through me. And then ultimately learn how to give everything to God and learn how to realize that God is the one who's doing everything. And again, that realization comes in stillness in your own self. I'll hand it over to Premdas.
Good evening, everyone. Back again. Thank you, Jamalji, for the inspiring this thing. So now where do I start? So the word humility. So I would like to just start with the thing that the word humility meant a lot different to me compared to the time I was before, when I came to the spiritual path, to the time I've come to the spiritual path. For example, before spiritual path or before knowing all these teachings, I thought humility was something like being weak, being meek, being mild, or something like these. These terms were the ones surrounding my mind when I think of humility. But now, as I'm starting to read all these lives of great saints and sages, and now the meaning is changing, like how Swamiji explained in this affirmation in the beginning, that humility is not self-depreciation, but it is self-forgetfulness and knowing that God alone is the doer. So like Jamalji pointed out, the sweet relationship between the Paramsa Yoganandaji and Rajarshi Janakanandaji, how Rajarshi ji says that the power comes from Master. So they were all these highly evolved beings. It was not the weak people. Okay, and now one more example that again helped my mind to move my mind from weakness to strength, and God is the doer concept, is one more, the Saint Francis. Paramsi Yogananda ji used to calls our Saint Francis as a patron saint. So being the patron saint, also Saint Francis is associated more with lady poverty. And Paramsa Yogananda ji used to tell, I would prefer the expression lady simplicity instead of lady poverty. Like Jamalji already pointed out, like if we focus more on the dust and on the head, the focus is back on us. So if we have to focus away from us, self-forgetfulness, we'll have to focus on something better. Instead of focusing on some rags or something, we can focus on something better. Like, and again, Anand Mahima, I want to share a small incident now of Anand Mahima. Once what happened, a devotee had brought her child to Anand Mahima. And she said, Anand Mahima, please advise this child. He has been little naughty. So Anand Mahima, in this particular case, she tells, child, be good, but not too good. So what does this mean? In the same way, like, for example, Jesus Christ is referred to as gentle Jesus, meek and mild. But we all know from the parables and the stories that the only expression that comes to my mind when I think of Jesus' life is all powerful. So all these things, these small things, has changed the expression of the word humility as something as self-forgetfulness and something as power coming from God. That's the meaning I've been able to like grasp till now. So now in the next part of this talk, I'm going to focus on self-forgetfulness or ego transcendence. So I'm going to my most of the points I've taken today is from the book Sadhu Beware. If you haven't read that, I would highly recommend you to go through the book. So in Sadhu Beware, Swami Kriyananda ji quotes, the first duty of every soul is to release the hold that ego consciousness has upon it. All other spiritual practices are subservient to this one supreme obligation. I address ego transcendence, therefore, as the first and indeed the only challenge on the spiritual path, whether one be renunciate, a householder, or living for God in some other way. Wow. I think I'm just going to repeat that one part again, that I address ego transcendence as the first and indeed the only challenge on the spiritual path. Let it be for renunciates or householders, etc. Okay. So we can sum it up like how we think of Kriya Yoga in our teachings, that offering the energy up to divine, upside, so offering our little ego to the infinite. I, a tiny bubble of laughter, has become the sea of mirth itself. So now also one more expression that had been given, where how a child clearly explains about this ego transcendence state. I'm going to narrate this small incident which happened to a student of Ananda school. So many years ago, this student had just finished competing in a race involving several schools. And then someone asked this kid, "Did you win?" And the kid replied, "No, but I won against myself. But I won against myself." This clearly shows the self-forgetfulness of that child. Beautifully said. So now we'll discuss few points from the Sadhu Beware book on ego transcendence. For example, the first point I'm going to focus on is to overcome the natural need for self-importance by enjoying your own unimportance. So, regarding this point, Swamiji shares a story of us. So, in the beginning days, there was a conference held on communities. So, Swamiji was invited to be one of the speakers there, and this went on for a week's time, I think. And during the week, Swamiji hosted a dinner for some of the speakers in the conference. So, what happened during the dinner? It was so unusual because Swamiji was the host, but somehow happened that everybody was so busy in themselves that they left Swamiji, and they were just speaking to themselves, forgetting who the host was, and also not knowing that the only person who had really done anything of community, started communities, was Swamiji. And Swamiji, being gracious, he said very little and kept quiet. But at that same time, he just recognized and he started to practice his own unimportance. He just started spending time with God. So he started just seeing this quality where if then the evening became delightful and he realized the inner freedom he had felt in that thought. Many times we also face this situation. From now on, maybe we can start enjoying our unimportance and offering it to God. Anyway, it's just His show, and we are just being a small part of it, playing our part. But we are going to play our part well. So next point I'm going to focus on is, when you see something that you would like it for yourself, buy it if possible, accept the satisfaction of possessing it, then, however, give it away with a free heart to someone else. And I would like to share again the same story which Swamiji shares here. Swamiji shares in this part that in 1955, when he was visiting SRF centers in Europe, he saw a beautiful wood carving of Madonna for sale. Madonna means the Mother Mary statue. So it was very beautiful and it costed $12. At that time, $12 for him was very expensive because it was almost 4/5 of his monastic stipend which he used to receive. What did he do? He had this desire to have it, so he bought the statue and then he gifted to his friend Dayamata. So in a sense, he possessed it, and at the same time, he let go. He, with his freedom, he gave it away to his friend. There was one bonus though, giving it to Dayamata, that whenever he visited her quarters, he could see the Madonna statue there. He always felt happy seeing that. Next point I'm going to discuss here is whenever any person praises you for any reason, don't accept their praise in your heart. And don't say ungraciously that it is nothing, because then we are putting aside their good taste and common sense. So instead of that, if we just sincerely thank them, but in our heart offer to God all that it is, it's a better way to deal with the situation. And I'm just going to. So now one more point which Swamiji discusses in this, one more step technique for ego transcendence is, once an American Swami had approached Swamiji for he had some thought which was bothering him. He's because in India, he said, how should he handle people's respect and reverence? Because in sometimes people think all Swamis are saints. So Swamiji advised him this way: don't concentrate on what you are receiving from others. Concentrate on what you are giving to them instead. And pray for them, because everyone are children of God. See them in that light. So again, self-forgetfulness is the way to it. For example, I'm remembering one more story of a devotee in Ananda when she had to take this bus in this rough neighborhood. And she tells Swamiji, what should I do? For this particular situation, I have to use a public transport and also go through this rough neighborhood. And Swami suggests to the devotee that she can start praying for the people in the bus. And when she started doing this, here what is happening? She's forgetting herself and she's focusing on God's power to pray for the other people. And what happened? From then on, she started relishing that moment, that every day she looked forward to this part of this journey where she could pray for others and share God's. This was one more thing where she felt God closely to her. And now I'm going to just end my talk by saying that Paramsi Yogananda ji asked us to memorize the poem Samadhi and repeat it daily. In one essence, he also meant that we should always dwell on the thought of our true identity and make the state of omnipresence your constant affirmation. And saying this, I'll pass it on to Jemal ji.
Thanks, Premdas. I'm just kind of deeply in thought here right now because I knew that person, sort of, I'll explain, who would ride the bus in San Francisco and would pray for the people on the bus, and it became her favorite part of her day. Her name was Viragi, and I only met her once, but it was when I first came to Ananda. And there was such a soul recognition when I came to Ananda that I've known these people before. And it was a very striking and powerful moment for me. So anyway, I was thinking deeply about that. She has since passed away, but a wonderful soul. One more story I was going to tell, then we'll do this affirmation together. It was simply about Swami Kriyananda. And at the end of some social gathering, he met some lady and he asked his name and he said, I'm Swami Kriyananda. And she said, but you're famous. And he said, okay, but why do you say that word but? And she said, well, all the famous people that I've met, they seem so important. And Swami just laughed, and he loves that, that she just thought he was like everybody else, that he wasn't important, that if he was famous at all, that it had not gone to his ego. I could tell many stories about him. One more I just need to sneak in is one night he was up above the village that he founded in America, Ananda Village in California, and he saw many lights on at night. And he thought, I did this, that before there was only darkness here, and now there's light. And then he thought, do I like that thought? I did this? No. And he said, and that thought has never come back again, ever again. That he refused to let that thought of I'm the doer ever come back in. So we all can do that with a little practice. Let's get into this. I'll read it again. Since it's short, we'll end by doing the affirmation. Humility is not self-deprecation. It is self-forgetfulness. It is knowing that God alone is the doer. It is the realization that nothing in this shadow world of appearances is all that important, except as it draws us closer to the Lord. Never tell yourself that you are sinful or weak or incompetent or lazy, except as such a statement may help you to surrender joyfully to God's power. Then live by that power. Never wear the mask of false humility. Humility is self-acceptance and self-honesty. You have a right to all power if you seek it in infinity, and if you never hold the thought that it resides in your little self. So let's do the affirmation a few times loudly together. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. Now let's do it in a normal voice. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live in thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. Let's now do this in a whisper. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. And now mentally, I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. Let's do it mentally a couple more times, taking it deep into the subconscious mind. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. I live by thy power, Lord. What I have is ever thine, ever thine. And you can mentally repeat this prayer with me. Thou art the doer, Lord, not I. express thy perfection through me as I strive ever eagerly to live in thy light. Okay, well, God bless you all. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please do practice this affirmation all week. It will help you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Joy to you.